Greetings. This is the lesson that accompanies Module 6, Leading in a Time of Crisis. In this module, we're going to step back to our discussion of organizational change and talk about the different types of changes that can occur, what you need to think about leading in a crisis, and some of the things that people have taken away from the pandemic. So in Module 4, we talked about strategic planning, which is when an organization develops a strategic plan. Usually it's for 3 to 5 years, and it lays out some broad targets for goals, but it does not necessarily give you the step-by-step instructions on how to achieve them. You still need to develop plans to go along with that, such as in your group projects. Change can also occur because of organizational restructuring. Sometimes there's a reason that staff has to be cut, or for different reasons, the leadership may decide to restructure the organization, either to narrow down the number of direct reports or to broaden the direct reports, and that affects all of the departments under that. Change can also occur because of major projects, such as block scheduling, standards-based grading, bringing in a new curriculum like STEM, or a language immersion program or something like that that requires a lot of changes and impacts every area of schooling. And finally, we all know that change happens because of natural disasters or crises. This could be a hurricane, tornado, blizzard, pandemic, many, many things. So what I hope you would take away from the module notes are that it's important to revisit the frameworks and get on top of the work. When you're having organizational change, you have to just go back to basics and keep in mind what you're doing. You sometimes have to forego top-down decision making. If you're in a crisis, then you can't necessarily start with the superintendent because they're so busy with managing the basics that they sometimes don't have time to look at what's happening at the school level. So using this collaborative leadership approach, you can work on things at your school level, at your grade level, things that are going to make a difference, and then hope that they will either grow laterally or trickle up. You need to focus on professional development because teachers can be thrust into something that's totally different, such as remote learning. That's one option that this pandemic has taught us. I can remember Hurricane Katrina in Louisiana, especially where they got hit so badly, and they were also thrust into remote learnings. The schools weren't even there to teach in. So they had already set up a distance education platform at a virtual school at the state level. And so people were able to go to libraries or community organizations, churches, where there might be some connectivity as people started to put the pieces back together so that learning could continue in some fashion. But teachers need to learn how to do this. And sometimes that professional development involves work groups like professional learning communities where you're actually developing curriculum and working on the basics. You also need to build networks and share best practices. One way to do this at the school level is just by dropping in to a teacher's room who is doing a good job of something. You all hear about teachers and what they may be doing. Maybe you hear about it in the lunchroom or, from other students or parents. And when it's possible, it's nice to stop in. I've worked with districts where they They did little mini videos of best practices and shared them on the school network. These would always be districts where there were like multiple elementary schools, multiple middle schools, and it wasn't feasible for the teachers to go to another school to observe somebody. So they shared it via video, and it was very effective. This is an important thing. When you have a teachers meeting, if you have a teacher who's having some success with something, they can stand up and share it in 10 or 15 minutes and provide a handout that might show other teachers how to do it. So these activities seem fairly basic, but they're very important because it inspires other teachers to learn to do different things. So I want to show you this little video about leading a remote team, which is something that the pandemic has required, or any natural disaster where the buildings are not functioning would require. So these are some things to keep in mind as you work on this.
5 tips for successfully managing remote teams. Leadership is the ability to get extraordinary achievement from ordinary people. Brian Tracy. Last week, Brian gave you 5 tips for working from home. But what do you do if you're actually running a business remotely and have people to manage? Finding yourself forced to manage a team remotely that you are accustomed to managing in person can present a real number of unforeseen challenges. It's essential, therefore, to plan ahead and develop a strategy that will enable you and your team to maintain your usual level of efficiency even when you aren't all under the same roof. To help you out, here are 5 useful tips for successfully managing remote teams. Tip number 1, have a daily check-in. In many instances, managing a remote team is going to require you to trust your team members to do their job, without the level of direct oversight and management that they might be used to. With that said though, even something as simple as a single daily check-in can go a long way towards keeping everyone on the same page and ensuring that everyone understands what is expected of them each and every single day. Once a day, schedule a phone call or video Zoom conference with your entire team and discuss the day ahead to create a daily check-in where every member of your team is able to listen for instructions, ask questions, and voice concerns. Tip number 2, utilize technology. Technology such as video conferencing apps like Zoom and online project management platforms such as Asana are priceless when it comes to successfully managing a remote team. If you make use of the right technology, you can stay fully connected to your team no matter where they're located, enabling you to send files back and forth, complete meetings via video conference, assign tasks to specific team members, and track their progress, and much more. Tip number 3, vocalize your expectations. Being suddenly required to work from home is almost certainly going to be a confusing time for your team, and it is likely that many, if not all, members of your team will be left wondering what is expected of them in this new work environment. Thus, it is essential to make your expectations clear from day one. Whether you develop a new set of expectations for your team that applies while they are working remotely, or you plan to hold them to the same expectations as always, vocalizing your expectations early and often is vital if you want to ensure that those expectations are met. Tip number 4, stay focused on outcome, not activity. Not being able to directly oversee what your team is doing at all times is no reason to become a micromanager. Rather than constantly attempting to ensure that the team is doing what is required of them, focus more on the outcome rather than the activity. So long as the outcome of their work remains acceptable, micromanaging your remote team's activity is not a necessity. Trust your team and the chances are they will live up to that trust. And finally, tip number 5, create a communication strategy. As you are undoubtedly well aware, good communication is vital if you plan to successfully manage a remote team. However, what qualifies as quote-unquote good communication when you are working remotely can be very vague. It often isn't possible to maintain the same level of communication that you are able to maintain when your entire team is under the same roof without bogging them down with emails and risk veering into the realm of micromanagement. At the same time though, keeping an open line of communication is still vital. Ultimately, it's up to you to find a balance between these two concerns and develop a communication strategy that will work best for you and your team. Now, we'd love to hear from you, so our question today is this: how will you manage your remote team differently moving forward? Leave a comment below and Brian will be sure to follow up with you. Thanks.
When you hear business and things that sound like company, it's important not to check out, because when you think about it, there are so many parallels between the business world and schools, between hospitals and schools, and the people who manage these and oversee these whether it's principal or higher up in the district, they have to manage food services, transportation, medical, operations, facilities, technical issues, things like that, plus run the core business, which in our case is teaching students. So even though the vocabulary may be a little bit different, the intention is the same. So I hope that you'll take that in mind when you hear these.
Thanks for watching, and remember, as Brian always said,
so one of the readings had to do with coping with change. And I'm just highlighting some thoughts that I think that you should take away from this. These were things that Miss Fagel, the author, brought out, and just the highlights that I think it's important to take away from that article. Again, staying positive is critical in a crisis. You may have to reframe your personal narrative, but stay positive. Focus on what you've accomplished, not on what you have not been able to do. Prune and preserve relationships. How you interact with people is important, and sometimes, especially when you're working remotely or on email or on Zoom, you can't see the people as closely as if you were with them. And so sometimes your words can be misconstrued. It's important to be careful how you say things. Building community is something that we all try to do in collaborative efforts. So that one goes without saying. Be specific when naming emotions. Not, I hate when you do that, but, this makes me feel like something. So that's just something to think about as you go through. And then exercise agency. Again, we talked about how the senior leadership may not be able to focus on what's going on at the school level. So sometimes you need to be proactive. As a group, you make decisions that are going to be positive and interact change, or else just make it possible to be successful in that moment, because decisions have to be made. So just go ahead and do it. You have your risk management plans, and that's why you have come up with mitigation strategies for if something happens. And then finally, if you can't fix it, aim for acceptance. Not everything can be fixed right in the time that you'd like to do it. So I don't know if you're familiar with that serenity prayer, but, accept the things you cannot change. So I think that this was a good article to bring out these thoughts. This video is about the 7 C's of crisis leadership: calm, confidence, communicate, collaborate, community, compassion, cash is king. So again, this is a business approach, but all of these apply in the schools and education. So let's see what the author has to say.
Hello, I'm John Quelch, the Dean of the University of Miami Herbert Business School. I want to share with you my 7 C's for coronavirus survival if you're a manager or a leader. Number 1 is calm. Your folks, your employees, your customers, your suppliers are going to be looking to you as a leader to project a sense of calm through this difficult, uncertain situation. Number 2, confidence. You have to be calm, but not still water calm. You have to project confidence that you're going to be able to see this through successfully with the minimum amount of hurt to the company, but also to all of the stakeholders who are relying on your leadership to get them through the difficult days and months ahead. Number 3 is communication. You have to relentlessly communicate. This is to avoid rumors developing that muddy the waters. But when I'm talking about communication, I'm also talking about a strategy for communication. You have to have a sense of order in which to communicate decisions and priorities, but you also have to have rapid communication to the entire body of constituents, not delays over hours or days or even worse, weeks. And silence is absolutely the worst possible thing that you can allow to happen, because that's when the rumor mill develops. So far we have keep calm, project confidence, relentlessly communicate. Number 4 is collaboration. You are not going to know all the answers. No one expects you to. This is a time for you to call on the resources, the capabilities of all of your employees, all of your team members, and bring them together in task forces, sub-task forces, have everyone potentially given a role in which they feel they can be contributing to overcoming the uncertainty, overcoming the crisis. Engaging a lot of your employees in this way will also reduce the rumor mill, give confidence to them that they will then project in turn to the people who are relying on them as their managers for direction. So collaboration, teamwork, delving into your organization to find the hidden nuggets, the people who really can step up at this moment, that's going to be very, very important. Next, I would say community. All of us live in communities. Our factories are in communities. Our colleges and universities are in communities. We are leading by example, not just within our organizations, but within our broader communities. And especially since we're talking here about an infectious virus, it's extremely important that we set an example, we model behaviors that are community-friendly and community-supportive behaviors. I would say compassion is extremely important at this time. You or I may have a strong stomach for these kinds of events. We may rise to the occasion if we're fortunate to have a good team around us, but there are many people in our organizations who are depending upon us who are not necessarily that resilient, and they need to be given the compassion to express their concerns in ways that, you or I might not necessarily need to do. So think of someone in your organization who has elderly parents who are in a fragile state of health. They're going to be doubly concerned about those relatives at this time when the virus is potentially affecting the most vulnerable and medically challenged in our communities. And therefore, if they want time off, if they want to work from home, if they need to have a little bit of space to look after their family members, please consider giving that to them. Compassion at a time of crisis is a very important manifestation of leadership. The most obvious commercial C of the 7 C's is cash. Cash is king at a time of crisis, and everything needs to be done to look both short-term and long-term at the financial health of the organization, because after all of your employees, suppliers, and customers are depending upon you to lead not just emotionally, but also prudently with respect to the long-term finances of the organization. So whatever you can do to conserve cash is going to be very important because that's what's going to determine whether or not your employees are going to be paid next week. To summarize the 7 C's that I've been talking about: number 1, stay calm. Number 2, project confidence. Number 3, communicate relentlessly. Number 4, collaborate. Look out for your teams and work with your team members. Number 5, community. We are in a community virus spreading environment. You have to look out for not just yourself, your company, your organization, but the community as well in the messaging that you're sending. Number 6 is compassion. Be compassionate to those who need that sense of reassurance and understanding at this difficult time. And number 7, cash. Cash is king. The leader has to look out for the financial future, not just the emotional future.
So, okay, those are the 7 C's. So with all of these thoughts in mind, and as you're leading in a crisis and trying to pull the pieces back after the coronavirus, the one thought that I would have that I think is important is to measure progress from where you started, not from where you want to be. And this is something that it's one of my mantras that I try to keep in mind all of the time. Years ago, when I started in my school district, and I started off at the elementary, and then they put me over the whole district, I think I told you. The person who had been doing it before was at the high school. She was the computer teacher. She had 2 computer labs of 286s. This was quite a while ago. And her dream would be to have a network so that in the labs, everyone could print to a high-speed printer. And that was it. That was her vision. And it was, as you can see, fairly limited. She firmly believed that teachers should not have computers, that it should all happen in the computer lab, and that it would consist of instruction on how to use Word, Excel, and possibly PowerPoint. So this really didn't go very far. I mean, there was an elementary school principal and a superintendent who had a much greater vision that technology was going to engage students and to help to, to revitalize the curriculum, to increase student achievement, and that it would be important for everybody. And so the area that I came into was pretty negative atmosphere. And over the next several years, we, like 5 or 6 years, I'd say, we had networks installed in all buildings. There were computers in every teacher's classroom. We were developing curriculum. There was professional development for the teachers. I had a technology team at the elementary school and at the high school consisting of kids who would go around and help the teachers when they were confused about how to do something, so that I was freed up to offer some of the professional development. And we also had a lot of teachers who were the teacher leaders in technology, who would work one-on-one with the other teachers, so that when we had a teachers like a half a day, we could break out into groups. And at one point, I was just so frustrated that it was taking so long. And this is what one of the teachers told me, and this is what I would leave you with, is look at progress from where you started. You'll feel much more positive. Thanks very much. I hope you've enjoyed the class. The current deliverables are the discussion board, your group project, and the leadership development plan. So if you have any questions, as always, feel free to email me. Thanks.